Welcome to the Phoenix Suns Solar Panel Podcast. We do appreciate you joining us. We did take last week off, so super happy to be here. Of course, my name's Tim Tompkins. Joining us, as always, Mr. Greg Esposito.
Ahoy, hoy.
And Mr. Dave King.
How's it going, folks?
So, no,
Everything.
no surprise. We're going to talk about this a bit today. Every year, Sports Illustrated puts out a top 100 list, and every year you have Ben Golliver making the rounds. He's usually stopping on Dunked On to explain why he has Devin Booker so low. I swear to God, every single year. So they just released it. There are two Suns players in the top 100. Some pretty noticeable snubs and some guys ahead of some certain players that probably shouldn't be.
And Ben Golliver isn't even part of it this year. So maybe that's why Devin Booker rose up in the ranks.
Maybe. I mean, it's the whole methodology is kind of interesting with this. They talk about in the intro to it. It's not about the future. It's somewhat about the past, but not really. It's about 2019, 2020, basically trying to project where these guys will be this season. So you don't see Kevin Durant
giving extra credit to recent playoff success is what they say.
Yeah, but so some of this just confuses me, and I know we'll get in depth into where the Suns players rank and who does and doesn't make the list here. But some of the methodology is quite confusing to me, and how they selected these guys, in particular with, as always, where Devin Booker's ranked compared to a few guys around him. I'm not quite sure that it passes the sniff test. Well, it smells like something. I'm just not sure it smells good. So
to give the details, what's been revealed through Wednesday, through Tuesday of this week is through the top 30, and that gets us all the way into all the Phoenix Suns. Devin Booker rose from in the low 50s to number 31 this year. Ricky Rubio was 57 last year, and he dropped to number 73 this year, because last year they gave him a little extra credit for having shot 35% on threes his first year in Utah. And then last year, actually, Dario Saric came in at 54th overall after having a good year with Philadelphia as a 24-year-old. And pushing, or 23-year-old actually, and making 39% of his threes and getting into the playoffs and all that. They were all excited about him. So his recency bias there. And now this year, he's not even in the top 100. So Dario Saric is outside the top 100, even though he had almost as good a season, but just not quite as good a season this year. And so that leaves the Suns with only two players in the top 100. And I'll bet our favorite Aaron Baines fan, the guy on Twitter and all that, is really bummed that still, after all these years, Aaron Baines is not even mentioned in the top 100.
Wait, you're saying he won't be in the top 30?
Oh, that's quite possible.
Well, if we believe our friend on Twitter, he's number one, right?
Baines fan club.
Starting it off with Deandre Ayton. So some of the notable players ahead of him, which, by the way, you went into depth on this on Bright Side of the Sun on your latest article, Dave. But some of the players ahead of him,
That's
Deandre.
BrightSideOfTheSun.com.
Yeah, if you're not aware.
Article by Dave King, King.
Some of the notable players ahead of him: DeAndre Jordan, Jared Allen, Bam Adebayo, Jonas Valanciunas, Jaren Jackson Jr. at number 83. Out of all of those players, I would take one definitively above DeAndre Ayton next season, and you could argue two of those players I would take above of DeAndre Ayton next season.
Well, yeah.
Which two?
Jonas Valanciunas. I think that's just clear cut. He's a better player right now than DeAndre is. And then arguably Bam Adebayo, but of course we've only seen Bam in, for the most part, a bench role. When he has started, he has been really effective and he's been really good. I'm excited to watch him play. I think he's a really good player. And I think you could make an argument for him next season above Ayton, but that's it. I mean, having Jaren Jackson Jr. at number 83 and not even having Ayton in the top 100, having DeAndre Jordan ahead of Ayton, why?
Well, look,
at this point in his career. Why?
Look, Bam is a great name, so that's why he deserves to make the list regardless. That's a great name there. But you're right. How in the world is DeAndre Jordan ranked ahead of DeAndre Ayton if this list is supposedly only about 2019, 2020, right? DeAndre Jordan is in this league still and got paid simply because he's Kevin Durant's buddy and they knew it would help get him to Brooklyn. Like, do not tell me that DeAndre Jordan is a better player than DeAndre Ayton. He's not even the better DeAndre. That's the annoying part here. So to push DeAndre Ayton out of the top 100 and have a guy like DeAndre Jordan in there is somewhat criminal. But that's why they make these lists. So guys like us will sit here and yell about SI.com for 15, 20 minutes at a time, and they get additional traffic in a time where nobody's going to an NBA section on any sports website. But really, if you look at what DeAndre Ayton did in year one and the growth that you saw from game one through game 82 with him, and you're trying to project into 2019, 2020, there is not a sane soul on this planet that would tell you that they wanted DeAndre Jordan over DeAndre Ayton in 2019, 2020.
Yeah, well, and I do have a question for you, Tim, on what about Jonas Valanciunas tells you that he's better than DeAndre Ayton? He's barely starting in Memphis.
I think he's better offensively. I think he's underutilized offensively, at least for a lot of his game. I think he's better defensively. I've always been a pretty big fan of his game. I think he's a really good big.
Okay. I personally would take DeAndre Ayton over Jonas Valanciunas if I had a choice in 2019-20. But I can see how we can differ on that, and that's fine. The only guy I thought, it really is a good argument on whether Jaren Jackson Jr. is a better NBA player this coming year than DeAndre Ayton, because Jaren Jackson Jr. does a lot of the stuff that DeAndre Ayton doesn't, and vice versa. Jaren Jackson Jr., JJJ, he does a lot of good things out there, but he fouls like crazy and he doesn't rebound.
Well, that's the thing. If he had been ranked number 98th, I wouldn't really have had that much of a problem with it. But the fact that he's ranked 83rd and DeAndre Ayton's not even in there,
right.
Why?
Well, how about Julius Randle being 79th?
Right. If you're going to put Jaren Jackson Jr. at 83rd, at least have DeAndre Ayton in the 80s, in the low 80s, high 70s. I totally agree with you there. Yes.
It's a flawed list because they try to claim that analytics and these things came into it, but I do not understand how, if you're only projecting for one season and you're supposed to somewhat be taking the past into consideration, but nothing beyond 2019, 2020, and not too far in the past. It's nuts to me, and I just don't get how Julius Randle is ranked. Like I said, I believe it was 79th, and DeAndre Ayton doesn't even make it in the top 100, right?
Well, yeah, and let's even argue for a bit about whether, okay, fine, you've got the big men. The big men are going to be in that top 100. Let's leave them where they are. Let's talk about the little guys who are also in that bottom 20, that first 20. I mean, you've got guys like Andrew Wiggins, and I like Terrence Ross, but I would much rather have DeAndre Ayton over Terrence Ross in 2019-20. Kyle Kuzma, Jeff Teague, Julius Randle. That's just a few in that first 20. That is just unbelievable that any GM or any fan would choose those guys over DeAndre Ayton in 2019-20. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's flawed. I mean, there's no way around it. The Suns players in these kind of situations get graded on a steep curve just simply because of how bad they have been, and in particular they were last year. And I don't think that's fair to DeAndre Ayton, because anybody that actually watched for any extended period of time saw the evolution in his game, knows that he was doing things that no other big man had really done in their rookie year, and he was handicapped by an offense that wasn't really geared to get him involved in the second half of of any game. So we're not even taking into, you think a list like this would take into account that Monty Williams is now here as well in Phoenix and would be able to help groom Deandre Ayton further going into this year as well, which I think is a very underrated aspect that people aren't talking about when they look at these kind of things, is the impact he'll have on DeAndre Ayton's game. And Ricky Rubio giving him passes into the post. I think we're going to see much more from DeAndre Ayton simply from those two factors without additional growth in his game. And I think he's going to take immense steps in year two compared to what he did in year one.
Let's talk about Ricky Rubio for a minute. Unless you want to keep going on Ayton for a little bit, Tim, what do you think?
To talk about the quote that was brought up when they were talking about Devin Booker playing with a competent point guard, referring to Ricky Rubio, but then having Ricky Rubio ranked 73rd. That's my favorite part about it.
Well, and they dropped Rubio 16 spots. I mean, he's been in the top 100 for years, Ricky Rubio, and they just dropped him partially because he really hasn't ever shot well. But you know what? He's always made players around him better. Utah has been in the playoffs the last 2 years since he got traded there, even though his numbers have leveled out a little bit because he wasn't holding the ball. But nobody was holding the ball very much in Utah. It'll be very different in Phoenix than it was in Utah, I believe, as far as Rubio being much more of a captain of the offense. And that's where he fits. That's where he belongs. He's going to look so much better this year than he did this past year in Utah as an individual player. Whether the Suns win more games or not is totally up to the players around him. But definitely Rubio is on the rise here as far as value in the league with the Suns rather than dropping. I don't get that at all.
Well, I love their justification though, that he can't shoot. He's never been able to shoot. Why is that all of a sudden so surprising to somebody? And if we're talking about situations they're finding him in, his passing becomes immensely more valuable as well, and his defense here in Phoenix. So that as well. It's not a surprise. This is not breaking news that Ricky Rubio isn't the best jump shooter in the world, and that's not something that just popped up between last season and this season. It's always been an issue.
Right. And so what do you guys think is going to happen with Devin Booker since Ricky Rubio is going to be holding the ball, making more passes, making more finishing passes this next season? Do you think Devin Booker is going to pass 5 assists a game?
No, I think his assists drop, but what we're going to see is in exchange, that three-point shooting and that efficiency there is going to skyrocket, I think. And I'm willing to trade in those handful of assists that he averages for a better long-distance shooting, because that's going to become more valuable in spacing the floor for the Suns, and he's going to have a guy that's going to take some of the load off, so he should be able to perform better down the stretch in games because he's not going to have as much usage on him. So overall, yeah, I think he probably finishes below 5 assists, but he's going to have a more effective season simply because Rubio is going to be taking that pressure off of him.
I think my interview with Matt Moore was really good last week with from what does he work for? The Action Network. Yeah. So anyway, Matt Moore was good because he did do a real analysis of Devin Booker's passing. This SI Top 100 only talks about Devin Booker's scoring and says his passing is really suspect.
Right. Moore, in what world is his passing suspect? I mean, Moore legitimately.
Moore did a little bit of a deep dive. He did say that his left-handed passes sail a bit. And that is generally a little true. I mean, it does have some truth to it that he's not sharp pinpoint passes with his left. Well, big deal. He was a shooter until last year, and he's going to get better. He's going to continue to get better. But SI went way too far saying he's really just a shooter and not a passer and can't pass well. That's going much further than any reasonable analysis should go.
Well, and I love somebody's got to get assists on a team if there's no real point guard. I'm like, if you looked at the roster around him, the amount of missed shots, like assists weren't growing on trees with that group of G leaguers that were playing around him primarily. So I think it was a a mile wide and an inch deep in what they were talking about analysis-wise when it came to Devin Booker's game in particular, and Ricky Rubio to an extent, as we talked about as well.
Just ahead of Devin Booker, I guess we should talk about De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In what world do you sit there and you go, De'Aaron Fox is definitely a guy I'd take over Devin Booker, that he's going to have a better season than Devin Booker in 2019, 2020?
You know what? I love De'Aaron Fox.
I do too. But if we're just talking this season and we're not projecting into the future like their
even if
basis
you do
is,
project,
I think you could make the argument if you project beyond this year, but in this thought experiment that SI is running, it was this season only, and I just don't see how if you're looking at this season in isolation, how you pick De'Aaron Fox over Devin Booker.
I would take it farther and say, even if you're looking at it from a career trajectory, Devin Booker is a special player. We are not talking about Mikal Bridges. We are not talking about Kelly Oubre. Devin Booker is a special player. De'Aaron Fox is probably a special player too, but don't underestimate how good Devin Booker will become and already is.
I'm not. I'm with you. Projecting in the future, I would probably still go Devin Booker, but the argument could be made if we're talking over the next 5 years that you could make an argument for De'Aaron Fox, and I wouldn't laugh you out of the room.
So setting Fox aside for a second, because I think that is kind of polarizing. People do really like him outside of Phoenix. What about CJ McCollum ranked ahead of Booker?
That didn't bother me as much, just because CJ McCollum has a much more proven track record, regular season success, hell, even playoff appearances. Going all the way to the Western Conference Finals last season, even though they did get swept. And that when you compare that to Devin Booker, they're such similar players that I understand why he was ranked ahead of them.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well. As you mentioned, Dave, they were taking recent playoff success into consideration, and you can't argue with what McCollum's been able to do there, paired with Damian Lillard. So that one isn't one that really stands out immensely to me.
Guess who hasn't been mentioned yet going into the top 30?
Who?
Donovan Mitchell.
Oh. Hey! I don't want to give too much away, but the NBA 2K20 rankings came out, and there is a chance that Donovan Mitchell has a higher rating than Devin Booker.
Hey, the entire game came out, Tim.
Yeah. Ridiculous.
Yeah, well,
ridiculous. The Mr. 32% in the playoffs this past year and 25% in FIBA. FIBA's great for your game. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, why is Devin? The Jazz announcer went on a rant about how it was selfish of Devin Booker to not play in FIBA. I'm sorry, but it's not. It's not selfish when 2/3 of the basketball players in your country did it as well. Why are we just looking at him and saying, "Well, Devin Booker was selfish"?
That's the ridiculous part, is to single out him as a single guy who is being too selfish. But Matt Moore, Bill Simmons, those guys have made good comments that this could have been Booker's chance to get away from the losing stigma and win something with a team as their best player. He would have been the best player on Team USA.
I think he should have played. But I also think that you shouldn't just call out one individual player over and over and over when a ton of other players didn't play. Okay. But I do think he should be playing.
If he played and he hurt himself, and we were going into a second straight season where Devin Booker missed training camp and a portion of preseason or all of preseason and wasn't fully ready for the regular season, what did he gain by doing that? And that's the reality of this, is he looked at it and he knew last season was another bust, and he wasn't there in training camp to learn a new system. He didn't get to play with these guys, and I don't think he wanted to find himself behind the eight ball with Monty Williams and this new group. I do not blame Devin Booker in the least. If he were the only guy that wound up doing this and nobody else in the country did it, fine, great. I get it 100% why people would be singling him out. But it was a decision made by numerous NBA stars to not do this.
And what about? I mean, nobody's talking about that De'Aaron Fox also begged off after going through the warmups.
He sure did.
Yeah,
and healthy. Had been healthy all year, and same with Marvin Bagley. The argument was that, well, it's possible De'Aaron Fox wouldn't have gotten enough playing time to make himself satisfied for putting out all that effort to go to China. Well, you know what? If you can't beat out Derek White, should you be ranked ahead of Devin Booker on the list where he'd be clearly the best player? People have said, the same people who are complaining about Devin Booker not going are saying he would have been the best player on Team USA. Well, guess what? De'Aaron Fox might not have even made a regular rotation. Guess what? Donovan Mitchell is the shooting guard on Team USA that they're saying that Booker would clearly be the best player on. What's wrong with this picture, people?
And again,
been trashed too.
I go back to, this is all Earl Watson's fault. If Earl Watson hadn't done all sorts of shady things to get Devin Booker 70 points, they would not hate him so much. That's what I think this is 100% where all this stems from, is that one game and an inexperienced coach's decision to do those things.
He had his 60-plus point average this past year in 3 straight losses too, though.
Yeah, but the hate was there long before that. I think the heat of all these takes comes from that one 70-point game.
That was one hell of a game, though, man. I still enjoy watching that game just because of the hilarity of the Celtics fans cheering for Booker. Who cares what the players were thinking? The players who couldn't stop Booker, who decided that Jay Crowder probably still doesn't sleep at night worried about Devin Booker coming up on him. But that was, Boston could have doubled him. They didn't. They could have done something to stop him. They didn't. And the fans were cheering for Booker.
Well, the Suns took care of that the second time around by getting Jimmer Fredette on the same team.
Yeah.
Right. Jimmer Fredette was better at stopping him than the entire Celtics team.
The best defense is a bad offense, apparently.
What was it Fredette going for, too? Was he going for like 10 points or something?
I don't know, but he took what did Devin Booker? I think Devin Booker had 1 shot in the last 2 minutes of that game, and Jimmer Fredette had like 4.
It was hilarity.
Falling down shots.
So we're gonna get out of here. We will be back on Saturday, though, where we're going to wrap up the Suns forwards versus the West series that we're doing. Then the week after that, we're going to go into the Suns centers, DeAndre Ayton as well as Aaron Baines versus the West. Hopefully, we'll just finish that up in one episode, though, and shortly after that, we should be getting close to try.
Yeah, actual basketball is coming, which is exciting.
Yeah. Hey, I got approved for my season credential today, so thank God. Brightside will be back on the case, and Solar Panel will be back on the case at the games this year.
Well,
very happy about that.
One of us will.
Well, I'll show up for one game on a special pity me pass, but at least so.
He gets passes whenever he wants them. He just doesn't want to go.
That's
but when
true.
the Suns get good again, then he's going to want to go. And
it's not that Greg doesn't want to go. It's that Greg doesn't want to work.
No, well, that and I don't want to leave my child at home. If I were going to spend my nights there, I just would have stayed working for the team rather than leave. So
whatever, putting your child ahead. Geez.
Yeah, damn me.
So I fly out every year for a home and home over the weekend to see the Suns, and every year these guys graciously help me out with tickets. And Dave will be like, "Do you want credentials?" And I'm always like, "Nah, I don't want to work."
You don't have to work, but it gets you passes to walk around the locker room and stuff.
Yeah, I don't want to work. I'm there to enjoy myself.
He means he wants to get drunk. That's what he's saying.
You can't get drunk.
No, you can't get drunk and go in the locker
All the
room.
time that are drunk to watch the post-game press conference, at least from the coach.
I would not be saying this on the podcast. On that note, we will be back on Saturday. We're going to finish up our forward season series, and then we're also going to have an announcement for our fantasy basketball league with the listeners. So tune in back this Saturday.